Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to another chilling tale brought to you by Shadow Storyteller. If you enjoy spine-tingling stories that blur the line between nightmare and reality, do not forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your support helps bring more unsettling bedtime stories to life. Now dim the lights, pull the covers close, and prepare yourself for tonight's story. Sleep Paralysis Demon Returns. It was the autumn of 2023, in the quiet town of Blackwater Hollow, nestled deep within the mist-laced valleys of northern Vermont. The air had grown sharp with the bite of early frost, and the trees stood like skeletal sentinels, their bare branches clawing at a sky that seemed to darken earlier each evening. In a modest, century-old farmhouse on the edge of town, its white paint peeling, its porch groaning under every footstep, lived a young woman named Eloan Voss. Eloan was not one for superstition. A graduate student in neurobiology at the University of Vermont, she prided herself on logic, on data, on the clean certainty of science. Yet, for the past 3 weeks, something had begun to unravel the fabric of her rational world. It started subtly, just a pressure on her chest during the early hours of the morning, a sensation of being watched from the corner of her bedroom. She dismissed it as stress. Midterms, grant proposals, the lingering grief over her grandmother's passing the previous spring, all of it weighed heavily on her mind. But then, on the night of October 27th, everything changed. She had gone to bed just after midnight, the wind howling through the gaps in the old window frames like a chorus of distant whispers. The house creaked in familiar rhythms, the settling of wood, the sigh of the furnace, but beneath it all, there was a new sound. A low, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against glass. Eloan sat up, heart hammering, and scanned the room. Nothing. Just moonlight pooling on the hardwood floor, casting long, wavering shadows from the trees outside. She lay back down, pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders. Sleep returned slowly, fitfully, and then it happened. Her eyes snapped open, but her body would not move. Not a finger, not a toe. Her breath came in shallow, panicked bursts, trapped in a throat that refused to scream. The room was colder now, unnaturally so. Her breath fogged in the air, though the thermostat read 68 degrees. And then, she felt it. A presence. Not behind her. Not beside her. But above her. Hovering just beyond the ceiling, pressing down like a weight made of dread itself. She tried to turn her head, to blink, to do anything, but her muscles were locked in silent rebellion. Then, from the foot of the bed, a shape began to rise. It was tall, too tall, its limbs elongated and jointed in ways that defied anatomy. Its skin was the color of dried blood, stretched taut over a frame that seemed both solid and spectral. Its face. Oh, its face was smooth, featureless save for 2 hollow pits where eyes should have been. And yet she felt its gaze. Cold, hungry, ancient. It did not speak. It did not need to. Its silence was louder than any scream. Eloan's mind raced. Sleep paralysis, she told herself. Asterisk hypnagogic hallucination. REM intrusion. It's not real. It's not real. Asterisk, but the chill crawling up her spine, the acrid smell of ozone and burnt hair filling her nostrils, those were undeniably, terrifyingly real. The figure leaned forward, its long fingers dragging across the quilt, leaving trails of frost in their wake. It tilted its head as if studying her terror with detached curiosity. Then slowly it reached for her throat. Just as its icy fingertips brushed her skin, a floorboard creaked downstairs. The figure froze. Another creak, closer this time. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. The demon's head snapped toward the bedroom door. For the first time, Eloan saw something flicker in those empty sockets, something like hesitation, or fear. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it dissolved into the shadows, leaving behind only the scent of damp earth and the echo of a whisper that sounded like her own name. Her body unlocked. She gasped, bolting upright, drenched in sweat despite the cold. She fumbled for the lamp, her hands trembling so violently she nearly knocked it over. The room was empty. But the window was open. She had closed it before bed. She was certain of it. The next morning she called her neighbor, an elderly man named Thaddeus Crane, who had lived in Blackwater Hollow his entire life. Over bitter coffee and stale shortbread, she told him everything, hesitantly at first, then in a frantic rush. Thaddeus listened without interruption, his gnarled hands cradling his mug. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, in a voice rough with age and something deeper, "That thing, it's been here before." He told her of a journal kept by the original owner of the farmhouse, a reclusive widow named Miriam Hargrove, who vanished in the winter of 1932. The last entry read, asterisk, "It comes when the veil thins. It remembers me. And now, it knows my blood." Asterisk. Eloan's great-grandmother had married into the Hargrove line. For days, Eloan tried to rationalize it all. Coincidence. Folklore. Trauma manifesting in dreams. But sleep became a battleground. Each night, the demon returned, not always visible but always there, lingering in the periphery of her vision, humming a tuneless melody that made her teeth ache. On Halloween night, the 31st of October, she decided to stay awake. She brewed strong tea, lit every candle in the house, and sat in the parlor with her back to the wall. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. At 3:17 a.m. the power went out. The candles flickered but did not extinguish. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls, twisting into shapes that should not exist. And then from the hallway came the sound of dragging footsteps. Slow. What? Eloan held her breath. The door to the parlor creaked open. There it stood, taller than before, its form more defined, its presence heavier. But this time it did not approach. It simply watched her. And in that gaze she saw something she had not noticed before. Recognition. Not of her, but of the blood in her veins. Of the woman who had once lived in this house. Of the pact, perhaps, that had been made long ago. "You're not real," she whispered, her voice cracking. The demon tilted its head. Then for the first time it spoke. Its voice was not a sound but a vibration, a resonance that echoed inside her skull. Asterisk, "I am as real as your fear." Asterisk. And with that it stepped forward. But the rooster crowed. Dawn broke through the eastern window, pale and golden. The figure shuddered, as if struck by sunlight itself, and unraveled into smoke that seeped into the floorboards and vanished. Eloan collapsed, sobbing. She left Blackwater Hollow the next day, sold the house, moved to a high-rise apartment in Burlington, where concrete and steel offered the illusion of safety. She never slept without a light on again. But sometimes, in the deepest hour of the night, when the city falls silent and even the hum of traffic fades, she feels it. A pressure on her chest, a whisper in the dark, and the chilling certainty that the demon did not follow her. It was already waiting. Months passed. Winter settled over Vermont like a shroud, blanketing the hills in snow so deep it muffled even the wind. Eloan tried to rebuild her life in the sterile quiet of her new apartment on the 12th floor of a downtown Burlington complex. She filled her days with lab work, lectures, and late-night study sessions at the university library, anything to avoid the silence of her own four walls after sunset. She kept the lights on. Always. Even when she slept, a small salt lamp glowed softly on her nightstand, casting amber halos that she hoped would keep the dark at bay. But the dark, it seemed, had already made itself at home. It began again in mid-January. Not with a full-blown paralysis, not at first, but with dreams. Vivid, looping nightmares in which she stood in the hallway of the old farmhouse, barefoot on icy floorboards, drawn toward a door she had never noticed before. It was black, without a handle, yet it pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat beneath wood. Each time she reached for it, she would wake gasping, drenched in sweat, her fingers curled as if they had actually touched something solid. Then came the sounds. At first, she thought it was the building settling, pipes groaning, neighbors moving furniture. But the rhythm was wrong. Too deliberate. A soft tapping on her bedroom window at precisely 3:17 a.m., just like that Halloween night. She checked the security footage from the building's exterior cameras. Nothing. No birds, no branches, no pranksters. Just snow falling in slow, silent spirals. Her sleep grew fractured. She started keeping a journal, Not scientific notes, but raw, trembling entries scrawled in the dim light of dawn. It knows I'm afraid of the space behind mirrors, she wrote one morning. Asterisk, last night I saw its reflection before I saw it. Just a flicker in the glass above my dresser. No face. Just hunger. Asterisk. She reached out to Thaddeus again. He answered on the third ring, his voice thinner than she remembered. You didn't leave it behind, child, he said without greeting. You can't outrun blood memory. That thing, it's tied to the Hargrove line. Not the house. You. Eloan's hands shook as she held the phone. What do you mean, blood memory? Thaddeus sighed, the sound like dry leaves scraping stone. Miriam didn't just vanish. She called it. Back in 32, folks whispered she'd lost her mind after her daughter died in the diphtheria outbreak. Said she'd read things she shouldn't have. Old books passed down from her grandmother, who'd come over from Cornwall with strange customs and stranger prayers. One night, Miriam lit black candles in the root cellar and spoke a name that wasn't meant for human tongues. She wanted her girl back. What came wasn't her. Eloan felt cold seep into her bones, deeper than winter ever could. And now it's come for me? It's been waiting, Thaddeus murmured. Sleep paralysis, that's just the doorway. The real horror is what walks through it when you stop believing it's only in your head. The call ended with a dial tone that echoed like a tomb closing. That night, Eloan did something she hadn't done since childhood. She prayed. Not to any god she recognized, but to the quiet, nameless hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. She lit a white candle, placed it on her windowsill facing east, and whispered, "Leave me be." For 3 nights nothing happened. She slept deeply, dreamlessly. She allowed herself to believe, foolishly, that it was over. Then on the 4th night the candle went out. Not blown out. Not extinguished by draft. It simply ceased to burn, as if time itself had skipped over its flame. The room plunged into darkness so absolute it felt like drowning. And then, she felt the mattress dip at the foot of the bed. Slowly, deliberately, something climbed onto the bed. Not with the grace of a cat, nor the stumble of a human, but with the unnatural fluidity of something that understood bone and sinew only as obstacles to be ignored. Eloan lay frozen, not from paralysis this time, but from sheer animal terror. She could move, she knew she could, but moving meant acknowledging that this was real. And if it was real, then nothing in her world made sense anymore. A hand, long-fingered, cold as grave soil, brushed her ankle. She didn't scream. She held her breath. The touch traveled upward, tracing the curve of her calf, then her knee. It paused. Then, with terrifying gentleness, it rested on her thigh. And then, it spoke. Not in her mind this time. Out loud. A voice like cracking ice and distant church bells. Asterisk, you carry her eyes. Asterisk. Eloan's breath hitched. Whose eyes? Asterisk, Miriam's. Asterisk. Pause. The weight on the bed shifted. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of wet stone and old incense. Asterisk, she promised me a vessel. A bloodline to walk through. But she broke the pact. Ran. It died before I could claim what was owed. Asterisk. Eloan swallowed hard. I didn't make that promise. Asterisk, blood does not ask permission. Asterisk. Tears welled in her eyes, hot against her cold cheeks. What do you want? Silence. Then, so softly it might have been imagined. Asterisk, to finish what was started. Asterisk. The hand lifted. The presence receded. The darkness lightened, just enough for her to see the faint outline of the bedroom door. She was alone. But she knew, asterisk knew asterisk, it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Patient. Because it had all the time in the world. And she was running out of it. In the days that followed, Eloan stopped sleeping altogether. She drank coffee until her hands trembled. She researched everything, Cornish folklore, ancestral curses, sleep paralysis entities across cultures. She found chilling parallels. The old hag of Newfoundland, the Kanashibari of Japan, the incubus of medieval Europe. All described the same thing, a being that straddled the line between dream and reality, feeding on fear, bound by ancient oaths. And then she found it. Buried in a digitized archive of Vermont Historical Societies was a scanned page from Miriam Hargrove's journal, the very one Thaddeus had mentioned. Most of it was faded, but one passage stood out, written in shaky, ink-blotted script. Asterisk. It demands a successor. Not just any blood, but one who dreams deeply, who walks the threshold between worlds and sleep. My line must continue or the debt remains. Forgive me, child. I thought I could outweed death. But death sent something worse. Asterisk. Eloan stared at the screen until her vision blurred. There was no escape. No loophole. The demon wasn't haunting her. It was claiming her. Desperate, she drove back to Blackwater Hollow under a sky bruised purple with twilight. Thaddeus's cottage was dark, but smoke curled from the chimney. He opened the door before she even knocked. "You've seen it," he said. Not a question. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. "How do I stop it?" He led her inside to a room lined with shelves of leather-bound books and jars filled with dried herbs. From a locked chest beneath his bed, he pulled a small iron-bound box. Inside lay a silver pendant shaped like an eye, its iris carved from obsidian. "This belonged to Miriam," he said. "She wore it the night she summoned it. The eye sees through veils. The silver binds. But it won't banish it, not fully. Only delay." Eloan took the pendant, its metal icy against her palm. "Delay how long?" Thaddeus looked away. "Until the next blood moon. Or until it decides you're ready." She wore the pendant every night after that. At first, the visit stopped. The tapping ceased. The dreams faded. She dared to hope. But on the night of the spring equinox, March 20th, she woke to the sound of her own name being whispered from inside the pendant. She tore it off, heart pounding. The obsidian eye had cracked down the middle. And from the crack, a thin wisp of black smoke curled into the air, coiling like a serpent before vanishing into the ceiling. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, Eloan sits in her apartment recording this account on her phone, her voice low and steady despite the tremor in her hands. Outside, the city hums with oblivious life. Inside, the air is still. Too still. She knows it's coming tonight. She can feel it in the way the shadows cling to the corners of the room, in the way her breath fogs though the heater is on full blast. She doesn't know if anyone will hear this, if anyone will believe her. But she needs to say it, needs to leave a record, however fragile, that she fought, that she knew. The clock on her nightstand ticks toward 3:17 a.m. The lights flicker. And from the hallway just beyond her bedroom door, comes the sound of bare feet on hardwood. Slow. What? Familiar. The footsteps stopped just outside her door. Eloan didn't move. She sat cross-legged on the bed, phone clutched in one hand, the cracked pendant lying cold against her collarbone. Her breath came shallow, controlled, not out of calm, but because any deeper inhale might betray her presence. As if silence could save her. As if it ever had. The doorknob turned. Not with a creak, not with the groan of old metal, but with a smooth, deliberate twist, as though the mechanism itself had surrendered. The door swung inward, revealing nothing but the dim hallway beyond, lit only by the emergency exit sign at the far end of the corridor. Its red glow painted the floor in long, bloody stripes. And then it stepped into view. Taller than before. Thinner. Its limbs seemed to stretch and contract with each breath it didn't take, as if reality itself struggled to contain its form. The featureless face tilted toward her, and though it had no eyes, she felt its attention like a physical weight pressing against her sternum. "You kept the eye," it said. Its voice was no longer distant, no longer echoing in her skull. It stood in her room, speaking in a tone almost conversational, soft, patient, as if explaining something to a child. But eyes can be broken. Veils can be torn. You cannot hide behind symbols forever, Eloan. She swallowed. "I'm not hiding. I'm waiting." Pause. The air thickened, charged with static. The lamp on her desk flickered once, twice, then died. Only the phone screen remained lit, casting her face in pale blue. "Waiting for what?" it asked. "For you to show your true face." The figure stilled. Then, slowly, the smooth expanse where its eyes should be began to ripple. Skin peeled back, not with gore, but with the quiet inevitability of a flower blooming in reverse, revealing not eyes, but two voids filled with swirling darkness. Within them, images flickered. Miriam Hargrove kneeling in the root cellar, candles guttering as she chanted in a language that made the walls bleed. A child's hand reaching from a shallow grave. Eloan herself as a baby, swaddled in a blanket stitched with protective sigils that had long since faded. "You think I am a monster," the demon said, its voice now layered. Many voices speaking as one, some young, some ancient, all weary. "But I am a consequence. A debt collector. Your bloodline called." I answered. "And now, the account is due." Eloan's fingers tightened around the phone. "What do you want from me?" "My life." No, it stepped closer. The floorboards didn't creak beneath its feet. They froze, frost spreading in fractal patterns with each step. "I want your threshold." "My what?" "Your ability to walk between sleep and waking. To dream so deeply that the veil thins around you. That is the gift Miriam promised me. Not her soul. Not her daughter's return. But a doorway. And you are the finest doorway yet." Understanding crashed over her like ice water. It didn't want to kill her. It wanted to use her. To turn her mind into a permanent bridge between worlds. A living gate through which it could reach others, feed on more fear, gather more power. "I won't let you," she whispered. "You already have." It raised a hand. Not to strike. Not to choke. But to touch her forehead. The moment its fingers made contact, the room dissolved. Suddenly, she was standing in the farmhouse again. Not as it was now, abandoned and rotting, but as it had been in 1932. Warm lamplight. The smell of wood smoke and dried lavender. A woman in a high-collared dress stood by the hearth, her back turned. "Miriam." Eloan tried to speak, but no sound came. She was a ghost in her own vision, trapped in a memory not her own. Miriam turned. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, her lips cracked from whispering forbidden names. In her arms she cradled a small bundle, a child pale and still. "That I only wanted her back," Miriam sobbed, tears carving paths through the grime on her cheeks. "Just for one more sunrise. One more song." From the shadows of the root cellar door, something stirred. Not yet the towering figure Eloan knew, but a shapeless mass of smoke and sorrow, drawn by grief like moths to flame. "I can give her voice," it had whispered then in that same layered voice. Asterisk. "But you must give me passage. A bloodline to walk through. A dreamer in every generation." Asterisk. Miriam had agreed. And now, a century later, the contract had found its final heir. The vision shattered. Eloan gasped, back in her apartment, trembling violently. The demon still stood before her, its hand resting on her brow. But something had changed. Its form flickered, less solid, more translucent. "You saw," it said almost gently. "You understand now. This is not cruelty. It is balance. Grief calls. Something answers. Always." She looked into those swirling voids and saw not malice but exhaustion. An ancient being bound by rules older than language, compelled to collect what was owed, generation after generation, until the line ended, or until someone broke the cycle. And in that moment, Eloan made a choice. She reached up, not to push the hand away but to grasp it. Its skin was cold, yes, but beneath that coldness pulsed something else. Sorrow. Loneliness. A hunger not for fear but for release. "What if I offer you something else?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The demon stilled. "There is nothing else." "What if I offer you her?" Silence. Miriam, Eloan pressed. Not her bloodline. Not her descendants. Her, the one who called you. The one who broke the pact. She's still out there, isn't she? In the in-between. Waiting. The demon's form wavered. The frost on the floor began to melt. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been dreaming of the black door," Eloan said. "And I think it leads to her." A long pause. The red glow from the hallway pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Then, softly, "You would open that door?" "I would," she said. "But not for you. For her. And for me. Let her face what she started. Let me walk away." The demon studied her. not with suspicion but with something like awe. "You are braver than she was," it murmured. "I'm just tired," Eloan admitted. "Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. If this ends tonight, let it end with truth, not more hiding." The demon withdrew its hand. The room warmed. The shadows receded. "Then we go together," it said. It extended its hand again, not to claim but to guide. Eloan hesitated only a second before taking it. The moment their palms met, the world dissolved once more, not into memory but into dream. She stood before the black door. It loomed in an endless corridor of shifting mist, its surface smooth as obsidian, humming with latent power. No handle, no keyhole. But as she approached, it began to open on its own, revealing not darkness but a soft, golden light, the kind that spills through windows on quiet Sunday mornings. Inside, a woman sat in a rocking chair, humming a lullaby. Miriam, younger now, at peace. She looked up as Eloan entered, her eyes widening with recognition and regret. "You came," Miriam whispered. "I had to," Eloan replied. Behind her, the demon stood silently, its form now less monstrous, more like a tall, robed figure cloaked in shadow. It bowed its head. Miriam rose slowly, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, not to Eloan but to the figure behind her. "I was selfish. I thought love could bend the rules of death. But all I did was chain us both." The demon did not speak. It simply held out its hand. This time Miriam took it without hesitation. As their fingers touched, the golden light brightened, then flared, so intensely that Eloan had to shield her eyes. When she looked again, both were gone. The room was empty. The door stood ajar, leading now to nothing but white mist. And then it closed. With a soft click, the black door vanished. Eloan woke in her bed. Morning light streamed through the blinds. Birds chirped outside. The city buzzed with ordinary life. She sat up slowly, expecting dread, expecting the weight of the night to cling to her. But there was only quiet. A deep, unshakable calm. She checked her phone. The recording had stopped at 3:17 a.m. On her nightstand, the cracked pendant lay still. But the obsidian eye was whole again, smooth, dark, and cool to the touch. She picked it up, held it to her chest, and for the first time in months she slept without a light on. Weeks turned into months. Spring bloomed into summer. Eloan returned to her studies, her research, her life. The nightmares did not return. The tapping never came again. But sometimes, on the quietest nights, when the wind blew just right through the trees outside her window, she would hear it, a faint, distant lullaby, carried on the air like a memory. And she would smile just a little, knowing that somewhere beyond the veil, a debt had been paid. A pact had been honored. And a doorway at last had been closed. Summer faded into autumn once more, and with it came the crisp scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke that clung to the streets of Burlington like a familiar ghost. Eloan settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lectures in the morning, lab work in the afternoon, quiet evenings with tea and books that no longer needed to be stacked like barricades against the dark. She kept the pendant on her nightstand now, not as a talisman but as a reminder. Not of fear but of choice. Of closure. She thought it was over. And for a time it was. But the world has a way of circling back to unfinished things. Especially when bloodlines whisper through the roots of old trees and forgotten promises echo in the spaces between heartbeats. It began with a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real, paper letter, sealed with red wax stamped with a symbol she hadn't seen since that night in Thaddeus's cottage. An eye within a crescent moon. The postmark read Blackwater Hollow, though the handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, looping, almost archaic. Inside, a single sheet of parchment bore only 3 lines. Asterisk, the door is closed, but the path remains. She is gone, yet the debt echoes. Come home before the veil thins again. Asterisk. No signature. No return address. Just those words, written in ink that shimmered faintly under lamplight, as if mixed with something other than water. Eloan stared at it for a long time, her fingers tracing the wax seal. She hadn't spoken to Thaddeus in months. The last time she'd called, his number had been disconnected. A neighbor told her he'd moved south to live with his daughter after a fall. She'd meant to visit. She never did. Now this letter sat in her hands like a summons. She tried to dismiss it as a prank, a coincidence. But deep down she knew better. The timing was too precise. The phrasing too intimate. Someone, or something, knew what had happened. And they were warning her. That night she dreamed of the farmhouse again. But this time it wasn't empty. Lights glowed in the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. And in the upstairs bedroom, the one that had been hers, curtains fluttered as though someone had just opened the window to let in the night air. She stood in the yard, barefoot in the frost-covered grass, drawn forward by a pull she couldn't name. The front door creaked open before she reached it. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax and dried rosemary, just as it had when her grandmother lived there. A voice called from the kitchen. Soft. Familiar. Aloan? Is that you? Her breath caught. It was her grandmother's voice, warm, slightly raspy from years of pipe smoke and laughter. She followed the sound, heart pounding not with fear, but with a grief so sharp it felt like hope. In the kitchen, a woman stood at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like cinnamon and cloves. She turned, and there she was, Agnes Voss, dead 3 years, her silver hair tied back, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes bright with quiet joy. "You're late for supper," Agnes said, smiling. "But I kept it warm." Aloan wanted to run to her, to bury her face in that familiar shoulder and weep. But something held her back, a whisper in the back of her mind, cold and clear. "This isn't real." "Grandma," she said carefully, "you're gone?" Agnes's smile didn't falter. "Am I? Or did you just stop listening?" She set down the spoon and walked toward Aloan, her slippers whispering against the floorboards. "You think you ended it, child. But you only closed one door. There are others. And they're starting to open." Aloan took a step back. "What do you mean?" Agnes reached out, her hand hovering just above Aloan's cheek. "The Hargrove line didn't end with Miriam. It didn't end with me. And it won't end with you. Blood remembers. And the things that walk in the in-between, they remember too." Then her eyes darkened, literally. The warm brown swirled into black, just like the demon's voids. Her voice dropped, layered with echoes. Asterisk, "You gave it Miriam. But the pact was never just about her." Asterisk. Aloan woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, the taste of cinnamon still on her tongue. Morning light filtered through her blinds. The pendant on her nightstand gleamed faintly. And on her pillow, beside her head, lay a single dried rosemary sprig. She hadn't bought rosemary in years. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced it down. She showered, dressed, went to campus. But her mind was elsewhere, tracing the threads of that dream, the letter, the impossible sprig of herb. After class, she drove to the university archives. If there was more to the Hargrove story, it would be there, in land deeds, church records, old newspapers. She spent hours poring over microfilm and brittle county ledgers. And then she found it. Not in Miriam's file. Not in Agnes's. But in a birth registry from 1894. Asterisk Eleanor Hargrove. Born to Miriam's grandmother. Died at age 7. Cause unknown. Asterisk. Beneath the entry in smudged pencil, someone had added, asterisk, spoke to shadows. Said they promised her wings. Asterisk. Aloan's blood ran cold. There had been another child. Another loss. Another grief that might have called something into the world long before Miriam ever lit her black candles. The pact wasn't born in 1932. It was older, deeper. And it wasn't tied to one summoning. It was tied to a pattern. Every time a Hargrove woman lost a child, or lost herself to sorrow, something answered. Not always the same entity, but something from the same place, drawn by the same frequency of heartbreak. And now, with Miriam gone, the cycle hadn't broken. It had shifted. To her. That evening, she booked a ticket to Blackwater Hollow. The town looked smaller than she remembered, swallowed by autumn's golden decay. The farmhouse stood at the end of the lane, its paint less peeling, its roof newly shingled. Someone had been caring for it. She parked and walked up the path, her boots crunching on frost-laced gravel. The front door was unlocked. Inside everything was clean, dust-free, the furniture covered in white sheets. But in the parlor, one chair was uncovered, a high-backed rocker facing the cold fireplace. On its seat lay another letter. This one was signed, Thaddeus Crane. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Alone. Asterisk, I knew you'd come back. I tried to stay away, but the house called me too. Not with fear, with duty. Your grandmother left something for you in the root cellar. She said you'd know when to look. Don't trust the quiet. The absence of the demon doesn't mean it's gone. It means it's waiting for the next heir to falter. And Aloan, you're not the only one who carries Hargrove blood. Asterisk. Her breath stopped. Asterisk, there's a cousin. Distant. Lives in Portland. Name's Corwin Vale. Never knew his mother's side. But the blood is there. Thin but present. And he's been having dreams too. Asterisk. She dropped the letter. A cousin. A man she'd never met. A man who might be walking blindly into the same nightmare she'd barely escaped. She pulled out her phone. Searched Corwin Vale, Portland. Found a social media profile. A photo of a man in his late 20s standing beside a motorcycle, dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that looked hauntingly familiar. Asterisk, her asterisk eyes. Hargrove eyes. And in his most recent post, dated 2 days ago. Asterisk, woke up again at 3:17 a.m. Can't move. Feels like something's watching from the ceiling. Anyone else get that? Asterisk. Comments flooded beneath it. Jokes about sleep paralysis. Memes, advice to cut back on caffeine. No one knew. No one but her. She typed his number into her phone with shaking fingers. Called. It rang 6 times. Then a groggy voice answered. Hello. Corwin, she said, her voice low, urgent. My name is Aloan Voss. I'm your cousin. And you're in danger. Silence. Then a dry laugh. Look, if this is some kind of scam. It's not, she cut in. Do you dream of a black door? Do you smell ozone before you wake up paralyzed? Does it whisper your name like it knows you? The line went quiet. Too quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. How did you know that? Because it came for me first, she said. And if we don't act, it's going to come for you next. She heard him exhale sharply. I thought I was losing my mind. You're not, she said. But you're standing on the edge of something old. And it's hungry. They talked for hours that night. About dreams, about family, about the strange pull they both felt toward Blackwater Hollow even though neither had been there since childhood. By dawn they'd made a plan. Corwin would come to Vermont. They'd go into the root cellar together. Find whatever Agnes had left. And if the pact truly demanded a bloodline, then maybe it could be rewritten. Not with sacrifice, but with unity. He arrived 3 days later, his motorcycle kicking up dust on the gravel drive. He looked even more like her in person. Same sharp cheekbones, same wary tilt of the head. You're real, he said, staring at her like she might vanish. So are you, she replied. They stood in the kitchen, the house creaking around them like an old friend remembering their names. That night, they descended into the root cellar, the same place Miriam had summoned the demon nearly a century before. The air was cool, damp, thick with the scent of earth and dried herbs. In the far corner, beneath a loose stone, they found a small wooden box. Inside lay 2 things, a journal bound in faded blue cloth, and a silver key shaped like a crescent moon. The journal belonged to Agnes. The first page read, Asterisk, if you're reading this, the veil is thinning again. But this time you're not alone. The key opens the black door, not to send someone through, but to speak to what waits beyond. The pact was made in sorrow. It can be unmade in truth. Stand together. Speak together. And remember, blood is not a chain. It's a bridge, asterisk. Aloan looked at Corwin. He looked back, fear and resolve warring in his eyes. Ready? She asked. He nodded. Let's end this. They held the key together. And as the clock struck 3:17 a.m., the black door appeared, not in a dream but right there in the cellar, rising from the earthen wall like a wound in the world. It opened, not to take, but to listen. The black door stood before them, not as a solid object, but as a tear in the fabric of the cellar wall, its edges shimmering like heat haze over summer asphalt. Beyond it, there was no golden light this time, no familiar faces. Only a vast, quiet expanse of shifting gray mist, stretching into an infinity that felt older than stars. Eloan's fingers tightened around Corwin's. His palm was damp, but his grip was steady. "Do we step through?" he whispered. "No," she said, remembering Agnes's words. "We speak to it. From here." She took a breath, her voice clear despite the tremor in her chest. "We know why you're here. We know what was promised. But that promise was made in grief, not truth. And grief lies." For a long moment, nothing happened. The mist beyond the door swirled slowly, like breath held too long. Then a voice emerged, not from the mist, but from the air itself, resonant and layered, yet softer than before. Asterisk, "You offer no replacement. No new vessel. Only words." Asterisk, "We offer an end," Eloan replied. "Not a payment. A release." Corwin stepped forward slightly, his voice rough but firm. "Our blood called you. But we're not asking for anything in return. Not a lost child. Not a second chance. Nothing. So the debt has nothing to feed on." Silence. Then the mist parted. Not to reveal a figure, but a memory, projected like a film onto the air before them. A woman in a long, tattered dress knelt in a field of withered corn, her hands pressed to the earth. Her face was blurred, indistinct, but her sorrow was palpable, a raw, keening grief that vibrated in Eloan's bones. Behind her stood a child, translucent, fading like smoke in sunlight. "She called," the voice said. Asterisk, "Not once. Many times. Across generations. Each loss a thread. Each tear a summons. You think you are the first? You are only the latest echo." Asterisk. Eloan's throat tightened. "Then let the echoes stop with us." "How?" the voice asked, almost curious. "By refusing to grieve in secret," she said. "By naming the pain instead of feeding it to the dark. Miriam wanted her daughter back. But she never said goodbye. That's what kept you bound, not the summoning but the unfinished love." Corwin nodded slowly. "My mother died when I was 5. I never talked about her. Buried it so deep I forgot her voice. Maybe that's why it found me." The mist shifted again. This time it formed two shapes, Miriam and the little girl standing hand in hand, not in a grave but in a sunlit meadow. They weren't speaking, just looking at each other, smiling. Then slowly the girl let go. She turned and walked into the light. Miriam watched her go, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't follow. She stayed, and bowed her head in acceptance. The image faded. The voice returned, quieter now, almost human. Asterisk, "You understand." Asterisk, "We're learning," Eloan said. Asterisk, "The pact was never about punishment. It was about witness. Someone had to see the grief. Someone had to hold the space where love and loss meet. For a century I was that witness. But I am not meant to stay." Asterisk, "Then go," Corwin said gently. "You've done enough." A long pause. The door began to shrink, its edges folding inward like closing eyelids. "The bloodline will always carry the thinness," the voice warned. Asterisk, "You will dream deeply. The veil will flutter near you. But it will not claim you, unless you invite it back with silence." Asterisk, "We won't," Eloan promised. Asterisk, "Then I release you." Asterisk. With those words, the black door dissolved into motes of silver light that drifted upward like fireflies, vanishing into the cellar's low ceiling. The air grew lighter, warmer. The scent of damp earth remained, but the weight, the ancient, watching presence, was gone. Eloan exhaled, her shoulders slumping with relief so profound it felt like grief. Corwin sank onto an old crate, running a hand through his hair. "Did that really just happen?" "I think so," she said, picking up the journal and the key. The key was already turning dull, the silver tarnishing as if years had passed in seconds. They climbed back upstairs as dawn painted the eastern sky in streaks of rose and lavender. The farmhouse felt different, not haunted, not empty, but simply quiet, like a house that had finally been heard. Over coffee brewed in Agnes's old percolator, they talked. Not just about the night, but about their lives. Corwin's work as a motorcycle mechanic, Eloan's research on neural patterns and lucid dreaming, the strange coincidences that had led them both to this moment. By mid-morning they'd made another decision. They wouldn't sell the house. Instead they'd restore it, together. Turn it into a place not of fear but of remembrance. A home where stories could be told aloud, where grief could be honored without being hidden. Weeks passed. They patched the roof, repainted the porch, planted rosemary and lavender along the garden path, just as Agnes had done. Neighbors stopped by with pies and stories of their own. Thaddeus never returned, but a letter arrived one day, postmarked Arizona, simply saying, "You did what I couldn't. Thank you." Eloan kept the pendant, but she no longer wore it to bed. Instead, she hung it in the kitchen window, where morning light turned the obsidian eye into a prism of soft rainbows. Corwin stayed for a month, then returned to Portland, but not before promising to come back every season. "Someone's got to keep you from talking to shadows alone," he joked. But his eyes were serious. Life settled into a new kind of rhythm, one that held space for both science and mystery, logic and legacy. And then, on the night of the winter solstice, just as the year turned toward 2026, Eloan dreamed again. But this time there was no paralysis, no dread. She stood in a vast, starlit field, the snow beneath her feet glowing faintly blue. Before her stood the figure, not as a demon but as a tall, robed presence, its face still hidden, but its posture calm, almost peaceful. It held out a hand. In its palm rested a single white feather. "For the next time the veil thins," it said. Not as a warning, as a gift. She took the feather. It dissolved into light the moment her fingers touched it. When she woke, there was nothing on her pillow. No rosemary. No feather. But on her nightstand, the pendant gleamed faintly as if warmed from within. She smiled. Outside, the world slept beneath a blanket of snow. Inside, the house breathed softly, full of warmth and memory, and the quiet hum of a story finally laid to rest, not with silence but with truth spoken aloud. And somewhere in the space between dreams and dawn, a door remained closed. Not locked. Just unnecessary. But peace, as Eloan would soon learn, is never the end. It is only the silence before the next breath. 4 weeks after the solstice, life in the farmhouse unfolded with a gentleness that felt almost sacred. Corwin returned in early February, bringing tools, laughter, and the steady comfort of shared purpose. They repaired the porch swing, cleared the overgrown garden, and even hosted a small gathering for neighbors on the first day of spring. Candles in mason jars, mulled cider, stories traded like old coins. The house no longer groaned with sorrow. It hummed with presence. Eloan began sleeping deeply again. No more waking at 3:17. No more frost on the windows. The pendant hung quietly in the kitchen, catching sunlight, casting harmless rainbows on the walls. She allowed herself to believe it was truly over. Then, on the night of March 30th, just one day before the anniversary of that first Halloween encounter, Corwin didn't answer his phone. She called 3 times. Voicemail. Worried, she checked his social media. His last post was from 2 days prior. A photo of his motorcycle parked outside a roadside diner in New Hampshire, captioned, "back to Blackwater soon. Feels like home now." But now, his location tracker, shared between them as a safety measure, showed his phone stationary, inside the farmhouse. Her blood turned to ice. She hadn't seen him all day. She'd assumed he was in town. Heart pounding, she walked through the quiet house, calling his name. No answer. Then she saw it. His boots by the back door. His jacket draped over the kitchen chair. His phone lying on the table, screen cracked, still glowing with her missed calls. And on the floor beside it, a single trail of wet footprints. Not hers. Leading from the back door, straight to the root cellar. The door to the cellar stood open. A cold draft rose from below, carrying the scent of damp soil and something else. Ozone, faint but unmistakable. "Corwin?" she called down, her voice trembling. Silence. She grabbed a flashlight and descended the stairs, each step creaking underfoot like a warning. The cellar was empty. No sign of struggle. No note. But in the center of the dirt floor where the black door had once appeared, the earth had been disturbed. Not dug. Pressed. As if something, or someone, had lain there for a long time. And beside the indentation, half buried in the soil, was the silver key. Rusted. Bet. And wrapped around it a lock of dark hair, Corwin's. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She backed toward the stairs, eyes scanning the shadows. That's when she heard it. A whisper. Not from the mist. Not from beyond. From inside the walls. Asterisk, he offered himself. Asterisk. The voice was familiar, layered, ancient, but softer now. Almost tender. Eloan froze. What did you do to him? Nothing, it replied. Asterisk, he remembered your words. Blood is a bridge. So he became one. Not to feed me, but to guard the threshold. To keep it closed, from the other side. Asterisk, her knees nearly gave out. He's gone. Asterisk, he is where Miriam is. Where all the unfinished ones go. But he chose it. Freely. To spare you. To spare the line. Asterisk, tears blurred her vision. She sank to her knees, clutching the rusted key. Then from the far corner of the cellar, a sound. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Like fingernails on wood. She turned the flashlight toward the sound. There, carved into the support beam, fresh, raw, still oozing sap, were 3 words. Don't open again. And beneath them, a symbol, the eye within the crescent moon. Only this time the eye was weeping. Eloan stumbled back upstairs, locking the cellar door behind her, dragging a heavy trunk in front of it for good measure. She called the police. They found no evidence of forced entry. No signs of foul play. Corwin's motorcycle was still in the shed. His wallet, his keys, everything left behind. Officially he was a missing person. But Eloan knew the truth. He hadn't been taken. He had stepped through. And now the door wasn't just closed. It was watched. From both sides. That night she tried to sleep. But at 3:16 a.m., the pendant in the kitchen began to rattle against the window pane, though there was no wind. At 3:17 the lights flickered once, then died. And from the direction of the cellar, muffled but clear, came the sound of someone humming a lullaby. Not Miriam's. Corwin's. The one he told her his mother used to sing. Eloan lay rigid in bed, tears soaking her pillow, listening as the humming grew softer, then stopped. Silence returned. But in that silence she felt it, the new weight in the house. Not a predator. Not a demon. A sentinel. Bound not by debt but by love. And as dawn approached she heard one final whisper, not in her ear, not in her mind, but in the creak of the floorboards, the sigh of the old walls, the whisper of wind through the trees. Asterisk, I'm still here. Asterisk. She didn't reply. Because she knew, some doors once opened can never truly be shut. They can only be guarded. And now the guarding had begun.